And our next speaker, speaking of Brice's Crossroads, we have Dr. Stewart Bennett, who is a history professor at Blue Mountain College. I have a lot of connection with Blue Mountain College. I told Dr. Bennett that my great-great-grandfather sold the land that Blue Mountain College sits on to Colonel Lowry that started the college, and the first building of Blue Mountain was my family home, Colonel Brower's home. So I have a lot of love for Blue Mountain College. My father, I'll tell you one quick story y'all appreciate. Stark may not appreciate this, being an Ole Miss fan, but my grandmother had two children, my mother and my aunt, and she was a devout Baptist. You couldn't get more devout than my grandmother. And she prayed for the soap opera actors after that. But anyway, she told my aunt that she had the old Southern accent. Now, Margaret, no R's in their words, and she said, Margaret, I want you to pray for guidance where to go to college. And knowing she would say Blue Mountain, because my grandmother had gone to Blue Mountain, and that was just where she knew the Lord would lead her. And so the time came for her to decide what college to go to. And Margaret, have you prayed to God about where to go to college? Yes, ma'am. Where's the Lord led you? My aunt looked at her and said, Ole Miss. And my grandmother said, Margaret, the Lord never led anybody to Ole Miss. You need to go back and pray some more about where to go to school. So anyway, I'm an Ole Miss law school graduate, so I'm saying that. Our next speaker is Dr. Stewart Bennett, and speaking of Brice's Crossroads, he's written a book about the Battle of Brice's Crossroads, and has also written a book I'm going to have to read. This is a mouthful. The Struggle for the Life of the Republic, a Civil War Narrative by Brevet Major Charles Dana Miller of the 76th Ohio Volunteer Infantry. And you know, those are the kind of books that are really, really interesting, that go into the life. I would give anything if my family had kept journals about their life during the Civil War. We lived 10 miles, or my great-great-grandfather lived 10 miles from Brice's Crossroads, where I live now, and they fought a skirmish on my farm during 1862. But we have no records of it other than one little short OR. Anyway, currently, Dr. Bennett is a professor at Blue Mountain, as I said, and he's going to talk about the war in '64 and the famed Union cavalryman and raider Benjamin Grierson. He's going to talk about General Grierson's mini raids. And I hope he'll talk about, Jim Woodrick gave us a program recently on one of Grierson's raids, and it was the darndest thing I've ever seen. There was a unit of Southerners in the Union Army, and there was a unit of Union soldiers that wanted to get out of Andersonville prison fighting for the Confederacy. So it's a fascinating.
Well, thank you very much. It's nice to be here today. It's a beautiful day out, and I know that you're sacrificing that to come and listen to me, and I really appreciate it, and listening to the others. I want to thank Graham for having us here, and for the Brice's Crossroads Foundation and all that y'all have been doing. They have worked hard to make some things happen, and I see Cheryl's here also from the Visitor Center over here at Brice's Crossroads too. It's good to see you, and a number of people. Wonderful to be able to come here and be with you. I guess I should start my block. All right. Now, it's interesting when we talk about the Atlanta campaign, when we talk about the war in '64 in North Mississippi, really the more that I studied on the Battle of Brice's Crossroads, the more I saw how interrelated it was with the Atlanta campaign. A lot of people just think, well, Sherman went over to the Atlanta campaign and he put it together and that was it, but it had something to do with us as well over here in North Mississippi. Go ahead and put on the screen the beginning here. I remember the old Bullwinkle cartoons where it'd give the name or, and it'd give you something different. From Brice's Crossroads to Grierson's Raid, the struggle for North Mississippi. Or, from victory to defeat in 6 months. I hope y'all can hear me. I tend to walk a bit, so if you guys in the back are like, can't hear me, let me know, okay?
What?
All right. They're like, can't hear you anyway. Okay, so anyways. What I want to do is go ahead and go to the first slide, see if I can do it here. There we go. All right, this is working out. All right. Some of you already boo. Well, of course, this is the man. On June 10th of 64, it brought with it Confederate victory at Brice's Crossroads and hope for the Confederates of North Mississippi region. But all that changed in just a matter of months. How could such a victory turn sour in just 6 months? Well, I've seen other victories turn sour before then, but I digress. 1864, like I said, proved pivotal in the development of the American Civil War. And we start with Sherman's plan for Georgia. Now, of course, Grant had won out west, and Lincoln looked at him and said, we're going to take you out to the Eastern Theater. You're going to be over all the armies. And Grant was the one who decided, yeah, I need to be in the Eastern Theater. I need to stay here. He puts his trusted subordinate Sherman in charge, as we already know for the most part. And so Sherman starts getting everything ready to move south. Now, when he's doing this, he is thinking, now, I've got to have a supply line. Now, it's going to move from out of Kentucky into Tennessee, through Nashville, down to Chattanooga, and then work its way down. But you got to understand something. Of course, the Union is going to have more men, but as they move out of Chattanooga area, as they move every so many miles, they've got to stop and they've got to make sure everything is safe. They've got to leave soldiers there and have their supplies. And then you keep moving and you keep moving and you keep moving until you get to Atlanta. But you've got this whole snake of a supply line all the way back to Chattanooga. You can't just leave it. You've got to have soldiers all over it. So it's kind of a funnel with your troops. They're dwindling down, right? And so he needs to be careful of that. And of course, Sherman has planned these things out, but there's one person on his mind that's really driving him crazy. No, not his wife. We would go to the next person here, okay? There we go, Nathan Bedford Forrest. Yeah. Some of you are for him, some of you are against him. I like him. He's dashing. He's done a lot of incredible things. I hate him because he's got the hair. Man, if only I had that hair. But anyways, this is the man that keeps Sherman up at nights. He's thinking, okay, if I can get down through here, everything will be fine. We follow our supply line, but this man is going to wreck it. He wrecked Grant's, and Van Dorn helped him in that the whole Vicksburg campaign when he first started out. And so Forrest is a man to be reckoned with. And so he's decided, here's what we're going to do. As I'm moving south through towards Atlanta, we are going to have North Mississippi taken care of. General Washburn is in Memphis, and he's going to take care of things for me. I'm going to send an army down from there. And so we know that a man named Sturgis, you can go ahead and go to the next one. Oops, that's me, Stewart. I'm so used to that. Yeah, he's going to send General Sturgis down with an army. He's going to try to find Forrest once. Things don't work out real well. He comes back a second time. Sherman sends him out a second time, says, hey, go after him, get him. We know how the Battle of Brice's Crossroads pretty much ends up. You have roughly 8,000 Union soldiers against 4,000 Confederates, and the Confederates under Forrest win. And so what happens is Sturgis' broken down army, what's left of it, comes back to Memphis, and Washburn is like, oh, this is bad, we're going to have to tell Sherman. And Sherman says, well, okay, he's done. Do a court of inquiry on why this went so bad. And by the way, send out the next guy. That's going to be Andrew Jackson Smith. A.J. Smith's going to be given about 14,000 men. And he says, you get back out there and you take care of business, because you got to understand something. When Brice's Crossroads happens on June 10th, you've already got Sherman all the way down past Dallas, New Hope, and Pickett's Mill. He's making some traction on this because Johnston is falling back, and he's got to have more and more, leaving people behind for supplies. Every time it gets longer and they don't capture Forrest means even more pain and agony for Sherman, okay? And so now A.J. Smith has gone out. He heads all the way up towards Pontotoc, and Forrest finds out. S.D. Lee and Forrest are both together on this situation. S.D. Lee is the one in charge. I usually blame him for Tupelo, but I digress. But the thing is, A.J. Smith is going to move on towards Pontotoc, and that's when Forrest and Lee set up a trap for him, Oklahoma. So what happens, though, is this guy's a little too wily for that, and he heads east and goes towards Tupelo, Harrisburg. When he does that, Forrest follows him up, and what we have next is, there we go. Did I do that or did you? Excellent. We'll just do it that way. Next slide that we'll do. So you have the fighting that goes on at Tupelo for the first day, and it ends in defeat for the Confederates. But A.J. Smith finds that because there's just not a lot of supplies and stuff for his horses and fodder and everything, he also finds that the bread has gone bad. And so he's like, okay, we don't have enough rations. We're going to head home. So they head home. Next slide, please. When they head back home, they hit each other over here on day 2 by Town Creek, okay? It's at this battle, I believe, on this fight, that Forrest gets shot in the foot. And the thing is, he gets shot on the bottom of the foot. So trying to ride in stirrups on a horse is very, very, very hard on him, and he ends up in a wagon. And you imagine Forrest in a wagon that doesn't mix, okay? So the thing is, they get that far, and then A.J. Smith wins here as well and says, well, you know what? We have got to head back towards home, back to Memphis, because, again, they're out of supplies and everything. And so Forrest holds back, he heals up. S.D. Lee falls back. He lets the troops rest. And so now you have these guys going on to Memphis, okay? All right. It's now around July 20th when A.J. Smith returns to Memphis. What's happening on the Atlanta campaign at this time? Where is Sherman? Peachtree Creek is on July 20th, okay? So he is in the middle of fighting Hood now, who's in charge of the army. And he's like, okay, he doesn't know. He's going to have Peachtree Creek. 2 days later, he's got the Battle of Atlanta. And then on the 28th, he's got Ezra Church. He's got his hands pretty full. And so on the 20th, okay, before he finds out that Smith is returned to Memphis on the 21st. On the 20th, Sherman order Smith to pursue and keep after Forrest all the time. Okay? And then he finds out the guy left and went to Memphis. So that doesn't help the situation. So Sherman is at the gates of Atlanta, and now they're refitting. Now they're back in Memphis, the Union Army, and they're going to come back out and try to take Forrest again. A.J. Smith, when he is sent out again, takes 20,000 men with him. Now, understand this. Sturgis at first had 4,000. Then when he fought at Brice's Crossroads, had 8,000. And then A.J. Smith goes out with 14,000. Then A.J. Smith goes out with 20,000. You see what's going on here? It's like the Union has so many men, so many armies, so many generals. He tells A.J. Smith to go after him. He even mentions to Morton, I'll make you a general if you take out Forrest. I mean, he's got all kinds of resources sitting there in Memphis to take care of business. So here Sherman's at the gates, and then what happens in the Atlanta campaign is they have to settle down to a siege. You fight these battles, and now he's stuck. Sherman's like, yeah, we'll round it up. We'll see what we can do. but he's worried about that supply line. Okay? So that's still a problem through the month of August. It's during the month of August, as Smith goes out, this time Forrest has with him about 5,000 troops. So we're looking at 5,000 as compared to 20,000. Now, Forrest knew that he could not risk a major engagement, but go to the next. There you go. Forrest says this: I have not the force to risk a general engagement, and will resort to all other means in my reach to harass, annoy, and force the enemy back. Okay? So he already knows he's playing a game that's going to be very difficult to win when you've got pretty much 3-to-1, 4-to-1 odds against him. Okay? So he devises a plan. And what he does is he says, in order to keep Smith out of North Mississippi without adequate forces, what he would do is he would raid Memphis. Now, here's the interesting thing. A.J. Smith is over in Oxford, raiding over there, burning some buildings, things like that. But at the same time, you've got Forrest decides, here's my diversion. If I can go over here and at least raid Memphis, it'll make A.J. Smith have to come back. And so they're like, okay. So they go and they do this. It was interesting because when this happens, the diversion is on a morning and it's foggy out and Memphis is sleeping and all. And here comes Forrest and all of his 5,000 just raising up a hoot and holler. Their plan is to do a couple of things such as free some of the people from the prison there, to capture some of the generals. As a matter of fact, Washburn was almost captured by Forrest, but he left just a few minutes beforehand and got to the fort, Pickering, I believe, just in time. And what's interesting, though, is they did manage to steal Washburn's uniform. Okay, so that's got to be very, very embarrassing, especially Union General Stephen Hurlbut, who was in charge in Memphis before Washburn, lost his job because he couldn't keep Forrest out of West Tennessee. When he gets this information, go ahead, next slide, and you can see it was in the papers and everything. But when he gets this information, go to the next one. He says, that's not it. Okay. Oh, that's right. I don't have it up there. Let me tell you what he says, and a quote. There it goes again. They superseded me with Washburn because I could not keep Forrest out of West Tennessee, and Washburn cannot keep him out of his own bedroom. I can understand Hurlbut being a little upset about that. For days, they panicked. And this was back later on, around the 23rd. This is what happened. All of a sudden, people got word that Forrest was back, and he wasn't. But they said the whole town was stampeded at about 10 a.m. by a report being circulated that Forrest had returned in force and was given again in town. It was the most disgraceful affair I've ever seen, and proves that there is demoralization and want of confidence by the people in our army and our army in some of our officers. That's a pretty bad situation for the Union. So things were shook up pretty bad for everybody at this time in Memphis. But then we move on. Now Forrest is finally free to hit Sherman's supply line. All this has been done. He's ready to move on it. But then what happens? September 2nd, the fall of Atlanta. Before Forrest had a shot, before he had that opportunity to make something happen, it's all over with. It's too late. He spends much of August and October 1864 raiding in Tennessee, he being Forrest. Forrest goes through the area, does what he can to protect, but he still has very few soldiers. Forrest and his command would soon end up joining Hood's Army of Tennessee in the situation where it's mainly called the Tennessee Campaign, where they go up into Spring Hill, Franklin, Nashville, and we know how bad that went. Hood's army is decimated at Nashville, And so here we have November and December that Forrest is away from his home state. This left Mississippi with fewer troops for protection. And this is when Benjamin Grierson comes along. Go ahead and show his picture, would you? This is Grierson. You can boo or whatever. We have a couple of minutes. Benjamin Grierson made a raid back around Vicksburg in 1863, did a really good job. He was also with Sturgis's Brice's Crossroads. Not the best situation for him. He was scared to death because he had his 4,000 against Forrest first, and Forrest had used the environment to hide his numbers, and Grierson thought for sure he had maybe 30,000 men, okay? So Grierson tried his best there, but now was a chance for Grierson to do something different. And now, in late December of 1864, Grierson had his famous winter raid. I don't know if that's the John Wayne one or what, okay? So Grierson raids North Mississippi easily. Go to the next slide, please. Ordnance, quartermaster, and commissary stores, besides 300 army wagons, most of which were marked USA, having been captured from General Sturgis at the time of his defeat by General Forrest near Brice's Crossroads. So Grierson is able to recoup a lot of those wagons that were lost 6 months before, just in doing some of his raiding. Much of Mississippi had changed at this time since Brice's Crossroads. Railroad tracks and bridges were destroyed without serious resistance at Tupelo and Old Town Creek, where they once fought. Now it was a piece of cake. A 3-hour fight at Egypt Station ended in Union victory. Let's see that Battle of Egypt Station. There you go. Does that look familiar? If you go down there, you'll see these pyramids. Okay? Really interesting. Anybody seen the pyramids down in Egypt, Mississippi? Next slide, please. That's about as good as I'm going to get for you here, okay? You're not going to see a whole lot. But this is at Egypt Station. Honestly, the 3-hour fight ended in Union victory. The only real fight Grierson's men saw through North Mississippi was this one. And it wasn't a huge fight. And it was the one, as you mentioned, where Union soldiers who were captured, instead of going to prison, said, we'll fight on your side. And some were captured in this battle. And that would be interesting to see what happened. You got captured by your friends, and they're like, why are you shooting at us, you know? So more Confederate supplies and material of war were destroyed easily. Grierson's entire command moved southwest from the Winona area, arriving in Vicksburg by January 5th of 1865. Next slide, please. Look at that. All the way from Memphis, Ripley, believe it or not, over by you were supposed to laugh. Anyway, going over here, all the way down to Egypt Station and crossing Winona. And look at what he did it with ease, okay? Because there really wasn't anybody to stop him anymore. Go ahead and go to the next one. Success rode with Grierson while he and his troopers completed their 450-mile mission. Grierson's forces managed to destroy 20,000 feet of bridges. Think about this in this time period. 10 miles of track, 20 miles of telegraph, 16 locomotives, over 300 wagons with supplies, 2 caissons, 30 warehouses of supplies, cloth and shoe factories, along with a number of tanneries and machine shops, captured 5,000 new muskets and a volume of foodstuffs. These were things the Confederacy needed badly. And it's gone. And it was so easy to do. So in conclusion, Union and Confederate manpower played a significant role in the part North Mississippi played in the war during 1864. Both sides could muster forces in the summer of 64, but by summer's end, Forrest was reduced to using diversionary tactics, and by winter, Grierson could raid at will. With Union victories in Mississippi, Tennessee, and Sherman's success in Georgia, the end of the war and the Confederacy became inevitable. Thank you.